We always have to wait for that lovely voice to come on. Welcome. My name is Kelly Learned. I'm a community planner and principal of Frank Planning Collaborative based in Canmore. And I'm part of the Ground Cube team that's been hired by the town of Canmore to complete the feasibility study. So we want to acknowledge the land that this project is located on in the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Ayarhe Nakota, comprised of the Bearspaw First Nation, the Chiniki First Nation, and the Goodstoney First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Kainai. We wanted to also acknowledge this land is home to the Rocky View Métis District 4 within the Battle River Territory. Our team would like to acknowledge and give thanks to Teresa Snow of the Ayarhe Nakota for sharing her thoughts and ideas as an advisory committee member. And Bronte, I'm just going to ask if you could let others that have joined the meeting, if you could admit them into the meeting. So during tonight's session, we're going to provide some information to you about the feasibility study that we've been working on for the Moustache Lands. I'm going to give you a little hint. There's a little bit of number crunching that's been involved in the work that we've been doing, so you'll hear about that. But you're also going to hear about the work that we've been doing with the advisory committee that's been informing this process, and then, of course, some of the next steps that we'll be doing as part of the process. At the end of the presentation tonight, I just wanted to let you know that we'll be giving a chance for folks to ask a few questions in the time that's allowed, and we'll be opening up the chat after the presentation. And as time allows, we will be answering the questions that way. So who's involved in the project? We're going to be introducing the advisory committee a little bit later in our presentation. For the consulting team, tonight we have members of the Ground Cube team. So Greg and Bronte are here. We have Matthew from Dialogue. We have Lee from Boundary Design and myself from Frank. I always flub that up. Frank Planning Collaborative, based out of Canmore here. As each of our project team members do their portion of the presentation, they'll introduce themselves and the work that they do as part of this project. So where are we starting from? We wanted to take a little bit of a step back from the site project and talk about where we started our project thinking from. When council begins its new term, it sets strategic goals for council. And many of you understand, and I know being a resident of Canmore, we experienced the pressure around livability in Canmore. And of course, this relates to the housing crisis that has been ongoing in our community. Housing action, of course, is a component of the council's strategic goals. And this feasibility project that we'll be talking about tonight is one of the actions that has been initiated to work toward Canmore being a place where all residents can thrive. As you're going to hear tonight, we worked with advisory committee members who expressed their aspirations for the site in contributing to a more livable community for Canmore. We're going to have Bronte from Ground Cube now talk a little bit more about the site-specific context of the project. Bronte?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bronte MacArthur. I'm a principal and landscape architect with Ground Cube, and I am based here in Canmore. So today we're looking at the Moustache Lands. So this parcel is located in the Palliser area, right on Palliser Trail. So adjacent residential buildings include the Peaks, the Hector, the Blackiston, and the future 100 Palliser Lane buildings. This site is adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway in the on-ramp and looking at this parcel of land here within Palliser today. Next slide. So this parcel, the Moustache Lands, is within the Palliser Trail ASP. So we really, as a projects team, started looking at the vision of the ASP and what that meant for the site design and what it could evolve into. So the area of Palliser really looks at becoming a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood with diverse population, accessible housing, opportunities, and space for local businesses. We're looking at creating a network of attractive public spaces, looking to walkability, environmentally sensitive design, and fostering a sense of connection to the surrounding natural environment. So leading to the guiding principles, which we really grounded the site design in, was working with and respecting nature, connecting people and places, providing homes for residents, creating a walkable mixed-use neighborhood, and maximizing views and access to sunlight. So really that last one being on the side of the valley, really looking to maximize that sunlight and highlighting those features within the site for both the buildings and the site and people enjoying the site. You'll see a little bit later on. Next slide. So looking to back to the ASP, we are looking at site 7. So the ASP guidelines include that this site will be mixed use, so residential and commercial, up to 6 stories in height. Looking at developing 250 to 350 residential units, all non-market affordable housing, and approximately 2,000 to 4,000 square meters of other uses, so commercial uses and other uses for the community. So this really was the guiding principle when we looked at the site design. I'll hand it over to Lee.
Sorry, trying to find my audio on button. Like I've never used Zoom before. Hi, I'm Lee Prevo with Boundary Design. I'm an affordable housing development consultant and focused primarily on this project on the financial feasibility and how we meet the requirements of the funders who would be funding a project like this. The feasibility project that we're working on right now is meant to meet the funding application requirements of both the Canada Mortgage and Housing Company and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And both of these organizations, CMHC and FCM, are the two fundamental ones that provide affordable housing funding across Canada. And that's what we're going after. Both of them have the same definition of what affordable housing is, which is that the median market rate for an area. So the median market rental rates for, say, a 1, a 2, or a 3-bedroom unit in Canmore, an affordable housing unit has to be 80% of that median market rate or less. So it has to be, the rental rate has to be 20% or more below that median market rate that is calculated for your community. And that median market rate is calculated once a year by CMHC for pretty much every community across Canada. So we're working under the fresh one, which just came out in January of this year. There are a few other requirements of both of those funding programs. The units have to be for rent only. They cannot be for ownership. They have to have a range of affordability. So depending on the housing provider we work with, they're meant to support, some deep subsidy for people who have very low income, some employee housing, some supportive housing for people who need some support services as well. We need to see a range of people being serviced by those units. Our feasibility program is geared, the steps that we've taken, and we'll talk about them in the next slide, are geared to be able to answer all of those questions for both organizations. Next slide, please. So what's been done so far? This project actually began before our project team got involved. So around the summer of 2023, the province of Alberta had transferred the Moustache Lands site to the town of Canmore with two major stipulations. One, that it be used for affordable housing in Canmore, and two, that construction begins with a groundbreaking around March of 2026. So just under a year from now, we need to be break ground. So those are the two critical principles we've been working under to try to get this project to a groundbreaking in a year. Last year around this time, we hosted a series of workshops with the town of Canmore, with administration, the planning department, and council to go over what their goals were, which Bronte mentioned here. So supporting a diverse population, space for local business, respect for nature, connecting people. So to understand what council and the town would like to see on the site, but also for us to be able to explain how we would be able to get funding to build these units, to actually get them to completion, and what the requirements of the funders were. So in a way, we were able to blend the town's aspirations with the requirements of the funding programs to guide the work that we're doing right now. Through the summer of last year, we put together a seed funding application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, seeking funding for us to be able to do this full feasibility activity that we're on right now. So the project we're working on that we started in January of this year that will conclude next month is this feasibility study that we're working under. And what we're meant to do here is identify the type of project that is viable on the site, the amount of funding that we can expect to receive, so financial feasibility, who could be served, who the operators would be for the units, what other uses on the site that are possible. So how do we connect people in places by bringing in other businesses or support organizations? How do we make sure this is a walkable and mixed use neighborhood? How are we going to maximize views and access to sunlight? And for us to do that, we we performed a list of activities, really. So we have an advisory committee that has been advising us all along, and it's made up of a broad range of organizations and people in the community. We've worked with a functional program provided to us by the YWCA, which is really a way of identifying kind of all the potential uses, all the potential users and people who could require support that could be working on this site. So we started with a broad range of possibilities and then narrowed it down into what we think is feasible. We've had meetings with interested businesses and social enterprises in the Bow Valley, prepared multiple design iterations, and then began a feasibility analysis where we model the financial requirements of this project and what is financially feasible, and also some of the other requirements of the funders around the level of sustainability and the level of accessibility. I think next slide, please.
So
So
that
our
would be,
advisory, oh, go ahead.
oh,
Yeah,
sorry, Lee. I can take this
you
one
go
on
ahead,
if you'd
Kelly.
like.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lee. Smooth transitions here, hey? So thanks for that, Lee. And as mentioned, we worked with different community organizations in and around Canmore. And our project team had used this as an opportunity to learn from the local subject matter experts on a project such as this. And tonight we are very fortunate to have a couple of housing providers that were on the advisory committee with us tonight. And so I'm going to invite Selena from the YWCA in Banff and Christopher from Canmore Community Housing to share a little bit about the work that they do in the Valley. And they were, of course, on the advisory committee. And then I will be sharing some information from Bow Valley Regional Housing. Unfortunately, they weren't able to have a representative here tonight, but we are going to be sharing a little bit of information about that organization as well. So I'm going to invite Selena and Christopher.
Great. Thanks so much, Kelly. So just to give folks a little bit of background on YWCA, we've served the Bow Valley for over a century with folks from Banff, Canmore and beyond, accessing our wraparound supports, which include crisis support, programs for vulnerable folks in our community, and a continuum of housing supports as well. We're talking about shelter, transitional and affordable housing. And most recently, we built Priscilla Wilson's place in Banff. It's a 3-story, 33-unit building with a net zero energy efficiency that provides affordable and environmentally friendly housing, which is quite a rare combination in the rural setting. So that was an exciting build for us and great to bring on those additional units to support folks in our community. In addition to managing affordable housing, we've operated a social enterprise hotel, the YWCA Banff Hotel, a lot of people would be familiar with. We provide space for a daycare here in Banff. So we've got a lot of experience in terms of operating those types of enterprises as well. Now, this might be a surprising fact for some out there, but in our outreach programs, we currently serve more Canmore residents than Banff residents. And this is a program that supports those who have been impacted by domestic or sexual violence. And where we fall short in being able to serve Canmore residents with a continuity of care is in not being able to support them with a housing continuum. So take, for example, a mama and her 2 daughters experiencing domestic violence calls our crisis line for support and accesses our emergency shelter and counselling programs right away. While she's looking for housing that she can afford on now a newly single income, we're able to support her with transitional housing and potentially even affordable housing on site, all while continuing to support her with our counselling and programs in the same space. But due to the need to reside in Banff, we aren't actually able to extend that affordable housing opportunity to Canmore families. And this is where we see a need for our work to be physically accessible in Canmore. Affordable housing here isn't a solo journey, and we're so grateful to have such strong relationships with a couple of those folks that you mentioned there, Kelly, Bow Valley Regional Housing and Canmore Community Housing. They're just so dedicated to affordable and community housing in the Bow Valley, and it really helps to inform the ways in which we can work together to best serve and support Canmore and the Bow Valley through a united effort. So having these partnerships with organisations like these who care so deeply about creating real solutions in housing affordability really lets us to consider that broader picture and work together on those goals. And so in terms of this feasibility group, we've been invited to inform the group of who we are, what we do to serve the community currently, and what we envision is a community that isn't just surviving, but thriving. And affordable housing and programming are truly critical components of this. So we really appreciate that. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Selena. Thanks so much for that, for sharing about YWCA Banff. I'm going to invite Christopher now to share a little bit about the Canmore community housing work.
Sure. Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for the good outline there, Selena. So yeah, Canmore Community Housing, we're excited to see this development move forward. As we are obviously property owners on the site adjacent, which Bronte alluded to earlier on the call, which is 100 Palliser Lane, we are very eager and keen to deliver below market rental housing here in Canmore. And this is when I say this Moustache Lands development as a whole is a very key component towards the big build out of the entire Palliser area over the next 10 years that we're looking to team up with and move forward on. And we want to support this project through expertise, through potential partnerships, which we talked about earlier on the call today, as well as providing essentially a safe haven and a sustainable tool that we can use to ensure that these properties remain below market in perpetuity. So we're here to support. We're here to give our 2 thumbs up to this project. We're here to see this break ground next spring. So thank you for the invite on this one, Kelly.
Awesome. Thank you both, Christopher and Selena. I'm just going to share a little bit from Ian of Bow Valley Regional Housing. For those that might not be familiar with these organizations, we've of course provided the websites on the slide here, and you're welcome to check out more details. But for Bow Valley Regional Housing, they're proud to serve the residents of the Bow Valley, and that includes Banff, Canmore, MD Bighorn, Kananaskis Country, and Banff National Park. They provide safe, affordable, and supportive housing. They're a government-appointed housing management body for the region and work collaboratively with local municipalities, provincial partners, and community agencies to meet local housing needs. Every day, Bow Valley Regional Housing helps nearly 600 residents of the Bow Valley find stability, independence, and connection through 8 of their housing programs. And these programs provide a mix of different things, such as advanced 24-hour healthcare, including dementia care in Canmore, affordable supportive living accommodations for seniors in both Banff and in Canmore, rent geared to income housing for low-income families in Canmore, and then a rental supplement program that helps around 70 households provide private rental housing at an affordable cost. So the Bow Valley Regional Housing Organization, they're guided by a mission, and that is to help Bow Valley residents secure and maintain income-appropriate housing and ensure that our most valuable community members are supported with dignity. The team of 60 dedicated staff provides services with professionalism and heart, ensuring every resident feels at home, from food and housekeeping to property care and administration. And they're proud of the people behind their success. They have 60 healthcare workers at the care facility in Canmore, and the Bow Valley Regional Housing's vision is a Bow Valley where everyone has safe, appropriate place to live, made possible through innovation, collaboration, and a deep commitment to community well-being. So I didn't do as well as I'm sure Ian would have. I did, but I wanted to make sure that everyone on the call also learned a little bit about Bow Valley Regional Housing, who is also part of our advisory committee. And I did want to mention too that along with the housing providers that we just spoke about, we also wanted to acknowledge and thank those from the town of Canmore administration that were on the advisory committee, Rocky Mountain Adaptive as a social enterprise, Teresa Snow from Ayarhe Nakota, and local businesses. We had CanGolf and Beamers on the advisory committee. And as Lee mentioned previously, we also had some one-on-one conversations with a variety of organizations around the community to inform the feasibility study. So in this next portion of the presentation, we are going to hear from Greg and the rest of the team around some of the conceptual design work that was done in partnership with the advisory committee. So I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Stewart. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer with Ground Cubed, supporting Bronte in the Canmore office. I'm going to go through two site plans fairly quickly, and just it's showing an evolution. So the first site test fit was really standing on the shoulders of all the work that went into the area structure plan. So pulling from that, those aspirational elements, and then applying it specifically to this site. So the original version is six-story buildings. And then, you know, all the elements that were required to support that in terms of bicycle parking, and then trying to think about how to fit this, those units onto the site and be a good neighbor to the residents adjacent, but also to the natural elements and wildlife surrounding. And then trying to provide a series of amenities that meet those aspirational goals. So I'm going to talk about it more on the next slide, but things like natural playground, some plaza spaces for pedestrians and cyclists to come spend time, enjoy some like cafes or restaurants, or visit the grocery or something similar. But this idea that, you know, on foot or on bike, you can easily navigate this site as well as connect to the rest of the town. So working closely with the town on how to make that happen. Next slide, please. So after doing that, and then as Lee mentioned, doing a little bit of economic analysis associated to that, the numbers came down. And then also, as Kelly mentioned, that, you know, talking with the advisory committee, the different user groups and operators, kind of the needs of the site needed to change as well. So the first thing right off the bat is you see 6 units is dropped down to 4 units, still at 6 stories high, but allowing a little bit more flexibility on the site. So really in this, what we heard was that this project and what we do on this site is important. It's important to Canmore, but it's important to this place. So there's a history here, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the idea that what we do on this site shouldn't be able to be replicated anywhere else. So really trying to be context specific. So looking at like the different forces that shape the land. So wind, and rivers, and glaciers, and seeing some of those undulations apparent in the landscape was important. How we cluster trees to focus views. You know, we want to take advantage of this location and the sunlight that we get, but also, you know, the view corridors are really important, but also help protect the site from wind and noise from the highway. So you see some of those elements working together to sculpt the land and create the spaces that we've provided. So again, with a pedestrian and cyclist oriented design, it was really about creating the heart or the center of this area, which is really about people. And it's people on foot that can arrive by bike or on foot, and finding those amenities. And we'll get into the more specifics there, but having a structured bike parking that's automated as a way of anchoring the space. But then from there, a plaza space that connects to a restaurant potentially, or a cafe, outdoor movable seating with tables and chairs and umbrellas and, catenary lighting that connect the spaces. So something that can be enjoyed kind of day and night throughout the year, and then providing those amenities for the residents of that place as well. We want to be good neighbors and attract other people, but we also want to have this feel like home. So what are those spaces? So we're thinking about natural play areas, flexible green space where you can throw a frisbee or a bocce ball, having the ground floor uses like a potential daycare and what that means when it spills out. So there's certain criteria that are required with fencing for that, and just space allocations. But again, we really want it to be a comfortable place to wander. So the short loop, the longer dog walking loop, sorry, and then connecting into the systems around for pedestrian cyclists that is developing in the town of Canmore. And again, we're being good natures to the natural elements as well. So being adjacent to a wildlife corridor, the types of trees that we plant are important. We want to attract, the birds, butterflies, bees, elements that can support pollinator gardens. And then we want to look at the stormwater on the site. So trying to create a site design that allows water to behave in the ways that it did prior to development. So how we capture water off the roof, how we channel it through the plaza, how we can use that to help offset the watering needs for the plant material on site, and then sculpting the land so that the flow of it and higher flow volumes is channeled correctly. Adjacent on Palliser is creating the opportunity for transit hub so that we're connecting to that system as well, and then having everything work together as a collective whole. I think that's it. Unless anyone from their team wanted to jump in, I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Greg. I'll briefly speak to the land use. So the Moustache Lands site is currently zoned as a future development district. So what that means is when the site has a design, is ready for development, what we're working through right now through feasibility, we have to assign a land use district to it in order to develop. So we are looking at developing a direct control district for this site that looks at meeting the needs of what we are developing, and also allowing us to include all of these key components that the entire team has talked about. So here we've really briefly shared right now the draft permitted uses and discretionary uses. So really looking at multifamily residential development with rental tenure requirements for looking at affordable housing. So that's kind of a key component of the uses. The ASP does decouple residential units from vehicle parking stalls. So we won't have a minimum requirement in the land use district. However, we have had lots of discussions about the commercial needs for residential parking, as well as visitor stalls, and what that looks like on the site. So we do have parking, of course, as you saw in the plan on the previous slide, as well as Greg mentioned, we're really making an effort to enhance our bicycle parking for residents, for visitors, for everyone who's going to visit the site. So looking at 1.5 long-term stalls per unit as a minimum, and 2 short-term stalls per 100 square meters of gross floor area. So that's other uses, commercial and other uses on the site. So really looking at creating a really comfortable bicycle parking, covered protected parking for residents, as well as really convenient short-term stalls for visitors of the site.
Hi, I'm Matthew Parks. I'm an architect and partner with Dialogue. When we're talking about the architectural and overall design concept, I just want to start by saying that the group that you're seeing speak tonight, we work as a design collaborative or collective. All of us, have been part of this process, and we also work and play in the Bow Valley. And so we have a really deep appreciation for how special this place is. And so when we're talking about this site in particular and talking about the inspirations that drive our design sort of hand and thinking, the external forces like Greg mentioned that shape the site, the views, wind, sun, weather, movement patterns as well are important to keep in mind. So obviously these mountains, as you see in some of the artwork here, have been an inspiration for a long time for artists and outdoor enthusiasts. The mountains are important because, as we all know, they orientate us within the landscape. So they're kind of like calendars, changing with the seasons. Sometimes they wear their winter snow coats. Other times they show us their rock faces in more detail. They're kind of like clocks too, because the shadows that they cast on themselves and on the valley changes, throughout the day and throughout the seasons. And so when we place those buildings on the site in the site plan that Greg walked us through, it's really important that exercise to maintain those views and focus those views and the visual connections that we have to these ranges. It's super important. And so, in fact, the spaces between the buildings are as important and magical as the buildings themselves. The next piece, Kelly, is there is a history, and Greg touched on this too, but tourism and Canmore as a mountain destination are a reality and an important economic sort of driver for our success. But there's also a cool story through history that makes Canmore unique. And so there's a mining heritage and an Olympic legacy that play a role in defining what makes this place special too. And so the buildings that served these functions in the past are interesting to, think about and use as a departure point when we think about an authentic architectural response for the affordable housing that's much needed. And then finally, history goes further than that too. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, we worked with Teresa Snow a little bit and talked about Stony Nakota history, but this is a pictograph from Grotto Canyon, which is, as most probably know, just east of this site. And, I've spent quite a bit of time in another life climbing in this canyon. There's a couple of good routes just to the left of this pictograph. And the funny thing about climbing is when you march into a canyon and set up the rope, the actual amount of time you spend climbing is a lot less than the time prepping and hanging out and waiting for your turn or belaying someone else. And so you get to know that place. And so when you're sitting and eating, suddenly the water becomes really loud. And so you find a spot behind some trees across the other side that's a bit of a noise break and realize that, oh, that's in the shade. And so if there's a breeze, then you can relocate again to find the sunny side that you can chase the sun as it moves across. And it's a very dynamic environment. But the reason that I'm showing this is because as practitioners across all of our disciplines, we're changing the way we work and the way we think about how we design and how we think about design. And so it's been a real opportunity to connect to Indigenous communities that we serve, Indigenous practitioners that we work with. And one of the things we're taking away from that is this idea of a land-based approach to design, to being in the world. And so that connection that I talked about, that I had through climbing activity, is a way that we can, bring that thoughtfulness into our work. And so this symbol or artwork or sign that's been there for thousands of years and is likely Indigenous, created by Indigenous communities, they've been there for a long time doing the same kind of thing, hanging out in a cool spot. And so when we think about the building architecture, we'll just go to the next slide, Kelly, please. Those spaces between are kind of like our canyon spaces, and Greg touched on it a little bit. This is a diagram showing, or a plan view showing the main floor programmatic elements. You can see in red there the retail opportunities. And so if there's a cafe or a restaurant, those potentially could spill out to patio spaces that different times a year could be really great spots to sit. And those two blue circles potentially could be vertical bike storage. We're definitely emphasizing the bike, but really trying to activate those spaces in between the buildings. It's all about what can happen there. And, you know, if there's a draw there and it's a cool place to be, that ties into, you know, the design principle from our advisory committee about inclusivity, diversity, and really making this a place that people can be proud to call home. You know, it's not a campus that's different from the rest of the urban fabric in Canmore. And then those pink spaces, I don't know if we can zoom in, it's hard to read, but those could potentially be that flexible network of support again that we were told by the advisory committee we generated together as a design principle. And so those could shift and move around depending on the need over time to have support spaces for folks as well. Next slide, thanks. And so back again to this canyon idea and being in Canmore, and people are very active and focused on the outdoors. This idea of shifting a simple form slightly to generate these sort of microclimates and spaces. So, you know, those the areas that are highlighted yellow could potentially catch winter sun and be a little sun trap and extend a shoulder season so that sitting outside is a lot more amenable and desirable over time. And likewise in the summer, you want to seek some shade, or even, you know, from morning to afternoon, these little microclimates could create opportunities for dwell time outside. And so that simple shift in that roof element to create those little zones, again, back to our canyon idea, I think it's a nice move that creates space that's really relevant to Canmore as a context, as a special place, like Greg mentioned. This is very specific to this place. And then finally, just a really rough view. This has been a quick exercise. And again, you know, there's a lot of design to come after this. But again, the ends of these buildings, it's as you saw in the plan, it's a double loaded corridor. And so we could have communal deck opportunities at the ends. Again, that's where people are dwelling, people are spending time. The rest of the building is simple. As we, you know, go into schematic design and next steps, we'll figure out where the windows are and how all the mechanical and electrical systems work. But as a concept, focusing on the ends of these buildings as the animated, the public, the active spaces that support what Greg was talking about on the ground plane. Lots to do still, but this is just a hint at what might make this project special.
So that takes us to our last slide here, and that is where are we at in this program and what happens next. So we are in the final handful of weeks of our feasibility study, which will culminate 3 weeks from now in front of Town Council, where we will present the results of this feasibility study that we've been working on to Council, trying to go over all of the aspirations that we've tried to include in here, how we would be able to, what is our opportunity to raise funding for this, how will we meet the requirements of the National Housing Strategy and the requirements of the two funders we mentioned, FCM and CMHC. And if we get support from Council to keep moving forward the project, then we would also bring forward a land use for the site. Those are the next two steps, immediate ones that will happen. As the land use is progressing, we would be preparing a capital funding applications to both CMHC and FCM. A capital funding application is really the remaining dollars that we need to finish the design and all the engineering work and all the construction drawings, and also to allow us to secure a builder so that we are able to break ground a year from now and start constructing these units. During that phase, we would also be seeking a development permit and a building permits for the site. If all that proves successful and we get to groundbreaking next year, then around this time exactly, we would be beginning construction on the site. I think I'll turn it back to Kelly and she'll wrap up where we are and moderate the questions that you may have.
Great. Thanks, team, for a great presentation. As mentioned at the beginning, we've now opened up the chat for any questions that you might have. We have just shy of 20 minutes. So if you'd like to direct your questions to the chat, we'll answer them in the order that they come in, and I'll ask my team members here to help me make sure that I catch the questions coming in. And I'll just check now to see if there's any. Okay, so we've got a question coming in, and I'm going to read it out to everyone as they come in as well, and then I'll direct it to the team member to respond to. Considering the high demand for affordable housing in Canmore and the limited availability of land, why hasn't the town prioritized using the Moustache Lands solely for affordable housing without allocating space for commercial development? This is a great question. In order to maximize the number of units to better meet community needs. And I think, Lee, you know that you'd be up to answer that one.
Yes, of course. Well, I think it's important to note that we're right now, for this phase of the work, we're targeting 270 units of affordable housing, which is going to support about 500 people. It's important to both the town, to us as practitioners of this work, but also to the funders that we are incorporating more than just housing units. So we need to provide some level of support for the people who are going to be living there. We're trying to draw people in from all parts of Canmore and the Bow Valley into this small village that we're proposing for the site. So it's very important that we do have more than just housing on the site. The amount of square footage that we're providing is about 27,000 square feet for commercial retail units, for supports like social enterprise, for daycare space. That's a pretty small percentage of the overall development, but it's enough that we can create a much more effective housing development than just affordable housing units themselves. And it's a really key part of our funding application that will be viewed very positively by both FCM and CMHC.
Great. Thanks, Lee. I don't see any other questions coming in. Oh, just kidding. Oh, thank you for your response on that. You did a great job, Lee. We'll give a couple seconds for any more questions to come in or comments. Another question just in, does the feasibility outcomes require Town of Canmore funding in your modeling, or are your goals to be funded through other organizations and CMHC and FCM?
Primary funding that we're looking at right now is from FCM and CMHC, but we do require other sources of funding. So that could be donations, certainly some more funding from the Town of Canmore, probably funding that's raised by whomever our housing operators are as well. It's a broad range. And of course, the donation of the land from the province of Alberta.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Lee. Greg, this next one might be for you in terms of considering any noise blocking from the highway.
Yeah, so we wanted to turn to kind of the natural elements for that. So rather than seeing barrier fencing, which you would see in more urban areas, the idea with this strategy was using landform. So kind of an undulating landform in combination with vegetation. So again, we were trying to maintain the view corridors, but in strategic locations, we wanted to bring in some vegetation, native plant material that would help mitigate the sound.
Right. And I have to say, as a resident that lives very close to the highway, I don't know what could be done to totally close out any of the sound from the highway. It is a noisy thing that we have in Canmore here. Thanks for that question, though. Thank you very much. Give a second to make sure there's no more questions on this. As we're waiting for questions come in, just a reminder that we will be going to council in early May. So there's an opportunity to hear about this project again, to see what the support level is for moving forward on the feasibility. And then if that moves forward, we have move into a different phase of the project after the feasibility. So I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Oh, just kidding. Another comment has come in. So the comment is, this area is known as a common gathering spot for elk. What measures will be taken to ensure safe and respectful human-wildlife interactions as the Moustache Lands are developed? So anyone on the team interested in taking that one on? I know that Canmore is doing a lot of work in terms of human-wildlife interaction and conflict. So being that it's near a wildlife corridor is also really important. During construction, that would be another consideration for sure. So not sure if G3 has any other thoughts related to the work that you do.
Yeah, I think that was great, Kelly. And I think we'll work with the entire Moustache Lands community as it develops to keep looking at wildlife patterns and movements and making sure there's safe spaces for wildlife as well as residents. So that's something we're actively thinking about as we design, and will continue to as the project, if the project as it continues. Yeah.
Thanks, Bronte. And of course, we know there will be impact. We have seen them grazing and hanging out in that area for sure. Another question. Given that immigrants make up over 25% of Canmore's population, and considering the town's commitment to inclusive community engagement, ensuring everyone feels seen and reflected in its programs, have immigrant and ethnocultural communities been meaningfully consulted in the planning and development process for the Moustache Lands affordable housing project, sorry. So we have not directly engaged with any of the specific immigrant organizations through our advisory committee. The housing providers have, of course, relationships and experiences with those communities as well. So that has been part of the work that we've been doing with those organizations in this part of the process, which is specifically the feasibility study. And Lee, I don't know if you want to add to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a key reason why we built this feasibility program around the YWCA's programming, because they have such a long history of interacting with all different cultures and different organizations of need, so that we're able to build off of the engagement and research that they've already done and the people that they are already housing, which represent exactly the populations that you're talking about. Similarly, our work in reaching out to CMHC and Bow Valley Regional Housing, that's where we got the bulk of our information around that.
Great, thank you. One more question that just came in regarding the Y and their involvement. As I understand it, the shelter system in Alberta requires any shelter space to accept any clients from throughout the province if there are vacancies here. So that entails bringing in clients from outside the valley, mostly larger cities, into the most expensive living environment in Alberta, with very little supports or transitional options for those clients. How would this be addressed in this project, and the support needs for those realities?
So shelter space is not one of the uses that we typically get funding under the National Housing Strategy for. So of course it's affordable housing, but the affordable housing funding we get is primarily focused on rental housing and not on that level of supports that's required, which isn't to say that we wouldn't have shelter housing in here. But at this stage, we are still working out what that mix might ultimately be. So I don't think for us as a project team, we're at a place where we could speak to, how we would address those shelter issues. But again, our work with YWCA and Bow Valley Regional Housing primarily, who do have experience with shelter, would be actually informing how we would address those questions that you're raising when this comes to an operational standpoint. So that's a question for after we've completed this feasibility where we're at today.
Thanks for that, Lee. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking an hour out of your evening tonight, a lovely sunny evening. And thank you to my colleagues here for providing your work and information. And again, we want to thank the advisory committee and the town of Canmore for the privilege of working on this project in our community. So thank you very much, everyone, and we look forward to sharing progress as we move through this process. Good night, everyone.
And thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.